Streets of Rage was released in 1991, but despite this, I bet most of you watching has played the game fairly recently on one of these consoles. Sega has a habit of releasing, then re-releasing, then re-releasing their games, and Streets of Rage almost always gets a spot in the lineup, but why is this? Maybe it's because of the kick-ass soundtrack, the secret bad ending that a lot of people don't actually know about, or, it's definitely not because of these two nightmares. I know that these two, which are named Mona and Lisa by the way, were a pain in the bum and caused a lot of people to game over right at the final door. As well as talking about how awesome this game is in this video, we're also going to be getting revenge for everyone who fell at the final hurdle. We're going to try out some of the wildest Game Genie codes that I could find, and use the most fun looking one to give them a taste of their own overpowered medicine. The game gives you a choice of 3 characters to choose from: Adam, Axel and Blaze, and they're all ex-cops in their early 20s. They're all hell-bent on taking down a crime organisation called the Syndicate and returning the city back to its normal, peaceful self. To get to the head of the organisation, Mr. X, they need to fight through 8 stages of scumbags and an array of bosses. Round 1 is called City Street, and this is where the first load of scumbags are lurking. You'll fight a load of Garcias, Signals, and eventually a couple of Kung Fu fighters called Hakuyos, then a couple of Noras until you get to the final boss, Antonio. Now, round 1 is as easy as it gets, so let's make it a bit more interesting. We're going to try out our first Game Genie code, which allows the player to jump in mid-air. Come on, kick! It turns out that, although the double jump bit does work, the attacking the enemy whilst in mid-air bit doesn't. This one's not going to work. Let's quickly move on to round 2, which is called Inner City, and has Freddy Krueger as the boss. Inner City has all of the same enemies from the first round, except now these clowns, which are called Jacks, have decided that they want to jump in on the action too. They juggle torches or axes and can cause some serious damage. If they do though, it's no problem because there are a load of apples and beef scattered throughout the game, and despite finding it all on the floor in the dodgiest parts of the city, your player has no problem yamming it all down to refill their health bar. When you eventually reach Freddy Krueger, or Souther, which is his actual name, you may notice that he moves in a mysterious way. This is due to an immunity he has to jumping attacks. It's probably best to just stick to punching and kicking then, if you want to beat him. Round 3 is set on the beachfront, and the boss here is called the Wrestler. This is a pretty straightforward level, apart from sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't. Sounds like a good time then to try a new Game Genie code that might help us against Mona and Lisa. The next cheat is called Regular Attacks Are Useless, and as you can tell by its name, it's probably not actually going to help us. You can't punch any of the enemies and it feels horrible. Have you ever had one of those bad dreams where you're trying to punch someone, but no matter how hard you try, it just won't land? This is literally the 16-bits version of that. Time to move on to round 4, and in my opinion, this is one of the best levels in the game. It's set on a bridge with lots of very, very deep holes, and this is what makes the level so fun. There's something oddly satisfying about tossing enemies down these pits, and even after all these years, it's still a ton of fun. The enemies aren't as stupid as you may think though. They know exactly what you're up to when you leave your fighter by one of these holes. The boss on this level is called Bongo, and he's a large chap of Chinese descent who runs diagonally and breathes fire. He's surprisingly quick, which makes him a bit tricky to beat. Plus, if you try any grappling moves on him, well, given his size, it's not going to end well. Round 5 is next, and this, in my opinion, is the toughest level in the game. It goes on forever and feels like everything is being thrown at you. It's the first level in the game where you have to refight one of the previous bosses halfway through the level, as well as battling a ton of normal enemies too. One group of enemies that really proves to be a pain in the backside here are the Noras. They do this thing where you go to hit them and just stay there until you move away. This sounds like a perfect time to try another Game Genie code, and I've got just the one. It's called Hit Anywhere, and it does just that. You can stand anywhere you want, and when you press the punch button, it hits all of the enemies on the screen at the same time. This looks like it could be a good shout for our big fight against Mona and Lisa. Speaking of Mona and Lisa, they're the main bosses in this level, but we won't be using any cheats against them just yet. We've got something else that's even more overpowered. And it's the police. This is a special attack that you only get to use once per life, and once the button is pressed, the police turn up and kill all regular enemies and do heavy damage to bosses. Mona and Lisa are very tough to beat because they can dodge almost every attack that you throw at them, plus they're super quick and aggressive. Because of this, I think the most popular strat back then was to hit them with a police attack, take a death, then hit them with a second police attack and finish them off. Now, there is a good strat to beat these two without using the police, and Retro Game Nova does a great job explaining how to do it in one of his videos. I'll leave a link in the description if that's something you want to check out. But first, round 6 is next, and we've got one more Game Genie code to try. It's set in a factory with conveyor belts on the floor and these crushers. The crushers are activated if the player gets a bit too close to them, and they will hurt anyone who gets in their vicinity. I thought this would be a good opportunity to try our final Game Genie code, which is called Moon Jump. I was expecting this one to be similar to Double Jump, and whoa, he's flown off into space. Your fighter will stay in the air for as long as you hold the jump button for, but like Double Jump, you can't hit enemies whilst in the air. This one probably won't be much good against Mona and Lisa then, although that being said, we can still have some fun with it in round 6. Remember on round 4 when I said that the enemies aren't as stupid as you think and they know exactly what you're doing? Well, that all seems to go out the window if you hover above a crusher. This was a lot more satisfying than it probably should have been. The boss fights in the factory include one with Bongo again halfway through, then one with 2 Southers if you're playing on the Mega Drive / Genesis version, or a chap called the Ringmaster if you're playing on the Master System version. Now, round 7 is not only, in my humble opinion at least, the best level in this game, it's also one of the best levels ever put in a Sega game ever. It's set entirely on this freight elevator which stops at different floors so you can take on wave after wave of enemy. It's not the hardest level by any stretch and there are no bosses here, but what makes it so much fun is being able to throw the enemies off the back of the elevator. There was something very satisfying about throwing enemies down the pits in round 4, and round 7 just takes that to the extreme. This level kind of acts like a calm before the storm as well, because the Syndicate's headquarters are at the top of the building, and this is where we have our big showdown with Mona and Lisa. Before we reach them though, we'll have to fight our way through all the other bosses in the game, all whilst being bombarded with attacks from a ton of regular enemies, and no help whatsoever from the police. Like seriously, we're on our own here. As we approach Mona and Lisa, I've been thinking about the Game Genie codes we've tried, and if we're being completely honest, there's only one that hasn't been completely useless. It has to be the Hit Anywhere cheat if we want to give them a taste of their own medicine, and because I used to think Mona and Lisa were Blaze's evil twin sisters back in the day, Blaze can do the honour of serving them up their karma. Yes, we did it. We showed those pair of nightmares what being truly overpowered looks like. It's finally over. Oh yeah, there's an actual final boss. Mr. X is the kingpin of the Syndicate, and before you get to fight him, he'll ask you if you want to become his right-hand man. If you answer yes, then it's a trick, and you'll be thrown all the way back down to round 6. If you tell him no, then you'll fight him with whatever lives you have left, and yay, you get the good ending. There is an interesting twist to this fight though, and that is there's also a bad ending, but you can only unlock the bad ending if you're playing the game with a mate. When Mr. X asks if you want to join him and one of you says yes and the other says no, he'll make you fight against each other. If the person who said yes wins the fight, then goes on to beat Mr. X, they'll become the new kingpin of the Syndicate. So, why won't Sega let you forget about Streets of Rage? Well, it's one of the best games they've ever made and still incredibly fun to play. It has smooth, responsive controls, amazing graphics, and a soundtrack that absolutely slaps. It paved the way for an incredibly popular series and still feels as fun to play today as it did all the way back in 1991. If you want to see more videos about 16-bit games from me, then please let me know in the comments. In the meantime, this video right here might send you on another nostalgia trip.